All right, so we are back again with Rene Urbanovich, the writer of the Creativity Conundrum, and we're going to be discussing product this time. So last time we did process, the process of creativity, and now we're discussing product.
Hi. Hi, Crystal.
Hi. Do you want to give a little bit of an overview of what this chapter is about?
Well, just to recap, we discussed process and how important process is, and we discussed the process of becoming more than anything, really, because even in your creative acts, if you're immature on the inside, your creative act is going to reflect what's on the inside. So the unseen is going to inform the seen. So what we want to do, and there's a little diagram in there about how you have all these excuses. I want to write a novel. I'll use writing. I want to write a novel, but I don't have a workspace, or I don't have time, or you just have all these excuses. But then when the excuses are here, and then when you become more of who you're supposed to be and you grow up, all of those excuses get popped by your own self-development. So creativity actually works on the inside on you, and you have this process of becoming as a person, and with some depth and who you are, and you can hone who you are better, so that your product to the world actually means something. And so we talked a lot about process in the process chapter, and we talked about the process of like procrastinating, and we call that in the book, we call that creastination. So that when you procrastinate, it's really something else is getting done. So it's creastination. And it's really, you're still mulling things over in your brain, and your brain is still solving problems, and there's all these things are happening. So you go from the inspiration stage, which some people never get out of, right? They just think of a million things. So the stages go as they go: inspiration, and then of course germination, and then execution, and then creastination's in there. Then after execution and you're done, you have the reception stage. So that's what this chapter starts on, which is the reception stage, I think. We start with reflection, delivery, and then reception. So what I want to talk a lot about is the reception, like when you finish your children's book. It's really scary to put it out there. It's terrifying. So we talk about what that takes, because creativity takes risk, and that's why. So I had just finished a collection of short stories that just, everything to me is excruciating and brutal, I guess. Everything is so much harder. Like songwriting was easy for me. Mm-hmm. Songwriting was never hard. But anyway, I had just finished some short stories, and I was with Jim's uncle, Uncle Les, and I was going through and checking it, and he's like, "What is that?" And I said, and we were close. We got along so well. We clicked really hard. And I go, "It's my latest thing. I wrote short stories." He goes, "Why?" And I go, "I just wanted to reflect on, 30-year marriages and the beauty and tragedy in it all. I don't know. It's what I do." And he's like, "But why?" And I go, "Well, how about this? Doesn't my book look great? Like, doesn't it look great?" Because I had self-published it with a beautiful cover. Like, I wanted to change the subject because he clearly didn't understand why. And my first experience, once I got the book in my hand, was with someone I didn't get a good reception.
Yeah, and that's really invalidating.
Yeah, and I mean, I love him. I'm not throwing him under the bus. I shouldn't have said his name. But sometimes you sing a song at church, let's say, and no one comes up to you and says, "Good job," because it wasn't a good job, maybe, or because they just didn't get it, or because they're not nice. There's so many reasons you have a bad reception. So what Julia Cameron says to do is draw a little circle and put the safe people on the inside of the circle that you feel safe sharing your work with. And sometimes you're not even in the circle.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, so the delivery and then the reception. So delivery is for a baby, because we talk about the baby being the metaphor for the creative process. So obviously you have to birth the baby, and then the baby goes out into the world and has to be received.
Right.
And it's terrifying.
Yeah, and that I always bring this up, but that metaphor of if the tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? And I always think about that when it comes to the creation of art, and how many people in the world have scribbled in notebooks and filled them with poetry and whatever, and never shared them with anyone. It's a little heartbreaking to think of, right?
Well,
And
isn't it? It's Emily Dickinson, right?
yeah,
She was a little bit of a hermit and she never really sent her stuff out, or maybe she did and it wasn't well received, but she was ahead of her time, really.
right.
People were still doing all those rhymes and all the specific forms. So maybe she was rejected. I don't remember, but it wasn't until after she passed away that they found under her bed oodles and oodles, like you said, of filled notebooks with absolute magic that was really, really significant to the poetry world and significant to culture, and still to this day. So if there's that song from Dear Evan Hansen, Falling in a Forest, and there's nobody around, do I ever really, or even make a sound? Do I
didn't
ever
know
make?
that was a song. Oh my gosh!
Well, they put it. It's just recently. It's all that saying's been around forever. Will I ever make a sound? Will I even make a sound? Will I ever make a sound? Will I ever make a sound?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate question, right? That's what we're talking about.
It is. And that's what the whole book is about, because I mean, I can set it up and we can go through each of the processes, but the only reason we're touching on them is for that exact question. So in process, when you do your art, like write poetry, it will inform your inner realm and you will grow and you will change and your own creativity will transform you. And in turn, you'll see your product can then be plugged into the collective and make a difference in our society.
Right. Yeah, and be seen and be heard, and it's that sense ultimately of connection, right? It's the ultimate reason we do creative acts, as we will see, is for connection and to feel a part of the human experience and touch others,
Yeah. So the product then has to be delivered, and then you have to finish it. After you execute it, then you deliver it, and then you get a reception. And then after that, I have something called recycled reception, which means it just depends on the medium. Sometimes it's cyclical. And there's also the kind of creativity that is in the job, like you're a problem solver and you found a bunch of problems in something and you brought it to your associate or your boss, and you do or you don't get reception for that. You don't get positive this or that. So it's not just in art, or you make up a protocol for PR, and you deliver it to everybody, and it just falls flat. Like, you always want to know what you're spending your time and energy on is going to land.
Yeah, absolutely. To feel like it matters, like it's making an impact or a difference, not even in a in a grandiose way, but just that, does this even affect any other human being? Right?
Yeah, right. So your product then is twofold. It's in you. I wrote an entire handbook and then I got fired. I don't know, and then I never got to use it. But just writing that taught you so much. So you're transformed anyway, which is why we focus on the process, which Jung said the goal is important only as an idea. So your finished product is really only important as an idea. The essential thing is the opus, which leads us to the goal. So the essential thing that we're spending our time doing is really working us. It's working us on the inside. So whatever we produce in the next 50 years, if we're young, is going to be a product of who we are on the inside. So this interplay is so important. But what I end up getting into after we discuss that is just the problem in society right now. And so I don't like talking about it because I feel like it makes me sound like some big grouchy person. Yeah. But I know that I'm a bard, and I know I'm not the only one that sees it. And I don't think I'm the first. Let's just say, put me in good company with, I don't know, Aristotle. He was suspicious of trying to please the crowd. So I actually quote an article on applause by Megan Garber, and she just talks about how applause meters and applause when at war, or just in the old days when they didn't have anything but applause, how powerful our applause was. And now Megan Garber likens it to the like-click button. Mm-hmm. And before that, I liken it to the applause meters in the 50s. right? Who's going to win the contest? Well, and then whatever contest it is, whoever text messages who they want to win. Never the better singer or never the better comedian or never the better built house, but whoever had the most votes is now okay.
Mhm.
So I noticed it with music in the beginning because I'm a singing teacher. I just noticed that some of the music that the kids were bringing in to sing was really, really bad. Like the piano was out of tune and the singer was off pitch and it didn't rhyme like most songs. Like all of a sudden these things were getting popular that had no form, no
Yeah.
form. And maybe,
Substance.
yeah, and maybe no content, but they sure knew how to market.
Totally. Yeah. And that's kind of what it comes down to in a lot of cases these days is not the production of the content itself, but the production of the hype around the content. And that's what's getting sold. And in a sense, there's this idea of the tyranny of the majority. Like in politics, when it's the inherent weakness of majority rule that
Right.
when things rely on voting and the majority vote, there's always this weakness that the majority will pursue its own objectives, which in this case is profit, right? At the expense of the minority factions. So in this case, minority factions would be people who are producing art that isn't maybe as palatable to, the status quo or.
Yes. And in one respect, like I'm sure that's how people felt about the blues because they were real musicians and the blues maybe uses 3 chords. And they didn't have to rhyme and they just go, yeah, I'm walking down the street, I'm walking down the street, I'm walking down the street. But the beauty of the blues was that it was accessible. So when we democratize art and everybody can get a hold of music and do whatever they want with it, that is not a bad thing. But it's a bad thing when, we can get to that later, but I need you, the philosophy queen, to help me. Who was it that was killed? Was it Socrates or was it Aristotle?
Socrates.
Okay, so is he considered the father of philosophy?
Yeah.
Okay, so the irony is that this applause button, pressing the like button is exactly like the applause. And sometimes we only click like or we only look at something if it has 1 million views, 500,000, 200,000. If it only had 100, I'm not going to bother with it.
Right.
So we're glossing over. So our clapping and liking become like approval gauges. And then I guess the irony is that Socrates, he was wary of public appeal. He was wary of the democratic vote.
Yep.
And he warned against the unwise people. And I think it's a hill that he died on. I think
for sure. Yeah, without question. Yeah,
yes.
You can read all about it in the Apology of Socrates, about how he's sentenced to death and he knows he very likely could have been acquitted with his ability to make sound arguments and a lot of evidence and whatever. This is what most people say, what most scholars say. He likely could have been acquitted, but he basically martyred himself for his ideal, which was that it's essentially the tyranny of the majority. His life goal was to corrupt the youth of Athens, and by corrupt, that's what he was that's what he was sentenced to death for. And by corrupt, he meant to always challenge their underlying beliefs, not corrupt, like get them all, drunk and high, but corrupt their fundamental assumptions that they made, that they were taught to make by
following the crowd. Right. So let's not follow the crowd. Well, then we're going to kill you. Well, then kill me because I can't go back on that. Don't stop with this. So that's where the irony is that had he said, okay, I will uncorrupt, I will teach people to follow, I will teach people to, click likes. He wouldn't. Yeah.
No, he was like a smelly kind of like homeless guy. He wasn't attractive looking by most accounts. Like he intentionally wanted, he identified as a gadfly, which was to sting everybody awake all the time. And what's interesting is in marketing, there's a term called social proof. And that's kind of what we're talking about, is that social proof is, oh, this influencer likes this, or word of mouth, like 500 people like this, or have said they used it, or 15 dentists like this toothpaste or whatever. So that's social proof, which is psychologically, it has a big impact on us because on an evolutionary level, we are designed to, oh, look, everybody doesn't want to eat that food. Maybe it's poison, right? Like that kind of a thing, right? So that's the mechanism at play here. Even though we're kind of, this is a more nuanced and complex situation, that mechanism isn't really relevant.
Also, you know, if you look in the past, which we're looking at Socrates, I meant Socrates, I accidentally said Aristotle, but that gives me hope that I'm allowed to say what we think, you know, you, me, my husband, like many of us that are not millennials, that are not, you know, Gen X, we're not under the covers at night, like looking at social media. I have to look at my notes to find out how many hours a day, but the hours a day that the younger people that aren't at work, you know.
Yeah, it's an obscene amount. I mean, whether we have the number available or not. I just worked on a whole mental health thing at work for this, all about social media, the effect
about it.
You know what? Let me just pull up some of the articles because I have stats. So Healthline, thanks for helping us out. So social media use.
I'm getting such a buzz from the wind at your house. I hope it doesn't stay.
Really?
Yeah, you sound gurgly.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so let's see. According to the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, 90% of U.S. teens ages 13 to 17 use or have used social media. Duh. That was pretty self-evident, right? The number of youth who experienced a major depressive episode in 2021 increased by 206,000 from the previous year, according to Mental Health America. According to the CDC, suicide attempts among U.S. adolescents increased by 31% from 2019 to 2020, as well as emergency department visits. And the link to social media, let's see. So in 2017, according to Science Direct Review, researchers found a significant association between social isolation and loneliness, noting a negative correlation with cardiovascular and mental health outcomes. And then further down, so that's like why people are turning to social media. A 2015 study by the UK government found that UK children who use social networking sites for 3 hours or more on a school day were twice as likely to report high or very high scores for mental ill health.
Wow.
A 2020 study analyzing 86,581,237 English language Twitter posts found there was a significant increase in social media use as stay-at-home orders for COVID went into effect. And the findings suggested that social media was being used as a coping mechanism to combat feelings of isolation. But the study noted that social media use increased negative feelings in the long term, even if it helped them in the short term.
That's good to know.
Yeah. So this one was the most important to me. This article is a 2022 cross-national online survey of the US, UK, and Australia. My battery's about to die. And Norway found that using social media for entertainment or to decrease loneliness was associated with poorer mental health during the pandemic. On the other hand, using it for personal contact and maintaining relationships was associated with better mental health. And so I think that is the real like tell-all. It's like, how are we using the tool, you know? So it's not the tool itself, but how we're using it. And if we use it to connect to real human beings, then it improves our mental health. And if we use it to escape from our loneliness or bad feelings, by scrolling, doom scrolling, comparing ourselves to, you know, super fit, filtered influencers, whatever, then it's hurting our mental health.
And I mean, I was 40 something. I was fully developed before social media became this big thing. And so I get impacted. I get influenced. I get a scroll for 10 minutes and just be in the worst mood. And I don't know why. Because somebody else has more, you know, cookies than I do. I don't know. And so you start to feel crummy and you don't know why. I can't imagine being an undeveloped human, a not fully developed human, and how much that would affect me. So
Yeah.
as much as I don't want to blame any one thing, social media is a huge reason that in the products chapter as well, and I don't even have the health line information that you just packed. There's so much there that we could unpack.
Yeah, and that's not even all of them, but yeah,
Right.
it's
So
out there.
the idea when it comes to creativity, let me just try and connect that to creativity and run it through the lens of creativity, is that the inside informs the outside, the unseen informs the seen. So the process on the inside is being contaminated by the society. So it's like a petri dish with a lot of poison in it. That little baby cell is gonna fucking die. So, and I don't know where this is in the book, but the quote is coming to me. David Bohm, the physicist who I love, said he was absolutely fascinated with the theory of the plasma, which my tiny little brain doesn't understand. But the theory of the plasma that he did research with, that might or might not be where he parted ways with Einstein, I don't remember. But this is why this might not be the theory of the plasma, but he believed that there inside the theory of the plasma, that it mirrored human life, because the individual could not live without the collective, but the individual behaved as if it was separate from the collective. And then the collective couldn't be there if it weren't for these individuals. So that there was this magical autonomy in the theory of the plasma between the individual cells, but this magical connectivity. And so neither could live without the other. So it's like a cancer cell in a human body. One little tiny cancer cell could multiply and kill me. So if we have too many contaminated cells in our world of humans, it's the math that I showed you that, if we skip out on process and we don't develop, and now with social media, we not only maybe don't develop and we're kind of empty, but we're damaged goods. We're contaminated with stuff that's so not true, false facts about beauty and what's important and all of that. So
Yeah.
if you take that and times it by 100, then you have 100 people, but all of those people are still uploading. All of those people are perpetuating the vapid, the emptiness in our. So what happens to society? So that's where this chapter goes, and it's really the whole book gets to that point. So we can say, look, this is not just harmless to put out music that's shitty. It's not harmless to spend hours a day scrolling just because you have nothing else to do, because it's killing you. You're not self-developing. So the lack of development on the individual produces a society that's vapid, undeveloped, shallow, superficial. But that when you understand what creativity is, you will stop hijacking the power of creativity, of all these ideas we have, of the artistry, and stop using it just for marketing.
Right.
Think about how it contributes to the whole. Just make a lens. You have this lens and you put on the creativity goggles. Does this contribute to the whole? Because we saw in chapter 4 that creativity is the pot that holds all things together. It's a container. And all of our creative acts have but one function: to unite us. So if your creative acts are only for money and selfish gain and fame and revenue and just commercial, it's damaging not only your internal realm, but it's damaging the entire world. It's where are we going to go with this?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack there. We had talked earlier about kind of the inverse role of creator turned consumer. And so a lot of people, and I noticed this in my family as a young person, there's a lot of consumption going on in the place of where creative acts would be and in the place of where connection would be. And this was way before smartphones. And so smartphones have taken it to like the nth degree, but at the same time, they've introduced content creation. And so there is a creation happening, or there's output, we could call it, happening. At the same time, consumption is happening, and it's becoming this like all mixed up together. But the question that remains is, if there's all of this creation happening, and it reminds me of a quote, and I forget who it is, a recent quote, and it's something along the lines of, no, at no other time in history has there ever been so many people speaking and saying nothing. And it is, like you said, it's a little bit of a bleak way to look at it, because
you have to find me that quote so I can put it in my TEDx talk, please.
Totally, yeah, I'll find it for you. Yeah, and so it's this kind of really fine line to walk, because who are we to judge whose words are worthy of being heard, right? Because it's everyone's God-given right to express. But what you're pointing to is that most people are not truly expressing, they're producing.
Or they're producing, they're skipping process, jumping to the product.
Right.
So when we skip process and we jump to the product, that's what happens. And so that's why actors, they sit by the phone and they're depressed because they just are ready to do the product. They don't have any process to do because they're not in a play. A writer can at least write a poem every day, but there's so many performing artists that can't do anything without a band, right? They're just waiting by the phone. That's depressing. And then on the flip side, people like Stevie, he has to put out content all the time. And my son, he's a comedian and he's a YouTuber. And so in the beginning, that poor child, he wasn't a child, he was 20 something, but just he never stopped. And then he realized, oh my God, this is not sustainable. And I actually met a girl named Quigley. This is probably going to go in, it wasn't in my book, but it'll go in my TED Talk. And she was really one of the early influencers with photography. She would take pictures of herself. And granted, she was not beautiful, but she knew how to make these great pictures. So she became literally overnight rich and famous. She was so good at it. But the demands of her fans wore her out. She got really depressed. And she thought, what is this all for? So when I saw her, it was at the Yellow Conference for women and entrepreneurial endeavors. She was so honest. She said, I was depressed. I didn't know who I was, and I couldn't get up in the morning. I couldn't do it. I had to change something. So she changed it to social media, SOUL. And she wanted to broadcast this message of having some depth. And I can't keep running after pleasing you guys. It's killing me.
Right. Yeah. That scares me sometimes about using social media to market my business, because I do check, did I get more followers today? And of course, it's because I want people to come and take my course that's about deep self-care and about Ayurveda and about really deep stuff. So I don't think I'm in danger in that regard, but I do think about it. I do think, like, I check in. Am I getting too focused on this? Am I checking my likes too often? That kind of a thing. And generally my answer is no. I don't have notifications on my phone, so I have to manually go in and look, and I hate feeling like my phone is yelling at me. That's how I feel when I have notifications. So.
Stop it. It gets in the way when you're trying to think.
Totally. Yeah.
Well, I love the Healthline stuff. And I love your vulnerability and your honesty about, look, we have to use social media for whatever it is. Your course, obviously, I talk about it often, is meaningful and deep, and it changed me. And I'm hard to change. I'm pretty stubborn. And I just don't follow anybody. Yeah. I don't follow people go, oh, they've got the answer. I just have never been like that. I've got my own mind, my own thoughts. But for however the desperation in my life last year, I just clung to your class. I needed it. And I thought, this is the bad time for me. I can't do it. It was the one thing that really got me through. And I use those, tactics, whatever you call them, those habits. I try and use those habits still to this day. So that's where you have to say, you have to have this idea, these goggles, and look at what you're doing through the creativity goggles and say, is what I'm doing going to improve is it for the betterment of, humankind? Is it to connect us as a species? Is there a great, in business, my husband told me this thing, And it's on my son Jordan's website, and I thought this kid made it up. He's talking about the 3 Ps. I figure, oh, maybe everyone's heard of it but me. So I thought this guy made it up, and it's everywhere. It's in business. So the 3 Ps is, God, what is it?
People, process, and product.
It's God help me. It's the planet. I have it in my notes. It's just making sure that what you're doing in your business is profit last. So the first thing is like, I don't know. I have to look it up because it's new to me, but it's everywhere on the internet. All these, not in business. All these businesses are using it that are conscientious. So profit is last on the 3 Ps. Do you want to look it up? What's the 3 Ps?
People, planet, and profit.
What is it?
People, planet, and profit.
Do you love that?
Yeah.
That's so great. But I mean, the whole point of creativity is that they don't even attach it to creativity. But the only way that we keep being born and that we keep, procreation going is creativity. And the only way we keep social media full is creativity. And the only way we solve the problems of, cancer or, a filling is creativity. So everything goes back to creativity for me. So nothing is separate. It's like God. So therefore, the mission of creativity is to hold us together and to keep us alive and thriving and to connect us.
Absolutely.
So you have to put those goggles on. People,
planet,
and
profit
last.
I almost, if it worked for the alliteration, because 3 Ps, that's very nice and clean. I would almost change profit to sustenance, because what ultimately do we need profit for except to sustain our ability to reconnect to the first 2 Ps,
Perpetuation.
Right, exactly. To perpetuate the ability to connect. Because what the hell else are we doing?
Yeah,
right?
Yep. Money is such a driving force, and yet it's so nothing. People, whatever. Anyway, that's another conversation. So that's what product talks about, and it was really, really hard for me, and it's hard for me in my TEDx talk. I guess I'm going to talk about it, to be like bitchy, sarcastic. Hey guys, knock that shit off. I don't want to be like that. I want people to see creativity and what it's for, and then go, oh my gosh, I'm a part of that.
Exactly. And I think, going back to what you said, for instance, about my course and using social media to market it, it's as long as I'm not positioning myself that I'm selling myself as an expert, or I'm selling myself as the answer, what we're ultimately doing is inviting other people to come play and come have their creative selves express, right? And that's the ultimate point. It's not like, come to me because I have the answer, or I'm the product. It's that you are the person who has the answer. And I think that's what keeps it in the realm of true creativity, because it's people employing their own creativity to come forward, right? Inviting them to the circle, inviting them to connect on that level.
And there is no formula. I was on a podcast maybe 2 years ago, right before COVID. And he said, so what would you say the 3 things are that will get people to be whatever, I'm kidding, but get them where you're at or whatever, help them in their, I said, you've got to be kidding. Yeah. There's absolutely not a formula. Everyone is completely different, and I would be robbing every single person of their process and creativity if I just came up with these 3 things. So the only thing I can say is this theoretical framework of, if creativity is this, then you might want to use it for that. And that movie that came out with Meryl Streep, DiCaprio, it was very...
Don't Look Up?
Yeah, very science fiction. It's so about this. Yeah. And so if we're all going to be okay with the fact that the people with the most money and, the most followers and the most influence and the most power get to just leave the rest of us to die, are we okay with that? And so my son Jordan has a whole website thing called Pele, and Telegram is another thing that it connects people without it being big business. And there's going to be ways for us to connect and advertise and share our stories that are not necessarily going to keep in Bitcoin, right? that are not going to perpetuate the system as it stands, where the only thing that matters is accumulation of goods and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exhausting. And that to wrap up, I want to just plug a couple of your sources, because one is The Manipulation of the American Mind, Edward Bernays and the Birth of Public Relations by Richard Gunderman. And if I'm not incorrect, Edward Bernays is the guy who came up with planned obsolescence, I think, maybe.
He was Freud's nephew.
Oh, okay. Okay.
He's the first person to come up with like advertising on the radio and using our base drives, because he learned so much from his uncle.
So manufactured need. He came up with manufactured need.
Yes.
Which makes sense. Yeah, because that's ultimately, and this is the important thing to understand, is that marketing and PR are a huge psychological project. And this is what I believe it was Alan Canner and Mary Gomes, who was one of my college professors, but they wrote this in a paper. It's a huge psychological project. I mean, even look at nowadays, we have persuasive design in social media, where it's the same logic as slot machines to get you to pull the thing again and pull the thing again and pull the thing again, you know, pull it down, refresh, right? And so the more we understand that and discuss that and are real about that, the more we as users and consumers of those features can be aware of what's going on in our brains. Yeah. And as parents, you know, I look at my child and man, that boy wants his dopamine hits from his screen. Like, it's out of control.
What movie was that with one of the founders, not Zuckerman, but one of the founders of Facebook, made a whole movie about, and he's talk about doomsday. I think I'm negative.
Yeah, that I had to turn that movie off. I know the one you're talking about. It's called oh man, I can't think of it, but I'll put it in the notes.
Yeah, but he explains that we put stuff right in your face to get you to click it. And all of our bots and all of our AI and all of the algorithms are for one thing: to keep you on the screen and to ruin your life so we can get rich.
Yeah, and it comes down to the commodification of attention span. Our attention span is now the ripe advertising space. It's, you know, it's no longer the billboard. It's no longer the, you know, right rail when you're on a website. It's actually your mental space. And that's what's so important about having an internal locus of control. Like what you're saying about beauty standards and all that stuff. When we have an internal locus of control, which is to say we use our internal values and sense of truth as our reference point, we can have all this craziness spinning about us and still return to that internal locus of control. And that I think is the most valuable thing we can teach our children.
I like that locus of control. I like that
psychology thing.
It's just such a vast thing. You know, it's kind of a joke to try and talk about it. You know, even just one of the chapters, we never ever get through the chapters. There's just too much to unpack. There's too much to talk about, because creativity is that vast. And yet our connection, our ultimate oneness, our unification, our link to the infinite, all of those things, that's what it's really about. And so whether we're reincarnated and we get to come back and keep trying, I don't know, or whether we, you know, die and our energy just dissolves, or whether there's a heaven and we're going to be in hell and you're going to be punished for what you did. I don't know. But just the idea of living your life being controlled by AI and bots, how about go, nah, I don't want that. And then maybe imagine what your life would be like if you were allowed to be part of something greater with more meaning, and just kind of slough that off, because it doesn't feel good to be controlled all the time.
Totally. Yeah. And to bring it back to the movie, it's called The Social Dilemma. I looked it up. And a great kids version actually is this great movie I watched with my son, called The Mitchells versus the Machines. And it has some really great comedic, lighthearted commentary, but profound commentary on exactly what you're talking about. And I also wanted to plug Guy Debord's Society of the Spectacle, because that was like required reading back in philosophy university days. So
Gotta get all of those in there.
I'll definitely add them.
All of them.
And to transition to the meditation, I want to specifically talk about the economy that you have in here in the book between the internal unseen and the external seen. So the internal unseen of product is the imagination, curiosity, the unconscious, ancestry, emotions, dreams, spontaneity, risk, and belief. And then the external is, dance, drama, film, fashion, decor, like all of the things you could produce. You could, architecture, public speaking, songwriting, graphic arts, all of those things. So I want to go ahead and do a meditation on this internal unseen, the imagination, curiosity, unconscious, etc. So I'm going to move this back a little bit to get into my meditation posture.
Okay.
Let's just go ahead and drop it all that fiery passion about society and about social media. Just let it all go. Just remember that this is a moment in time, in an infinite sea of time. That everything that's happening that feels so important and so immediate is a tiny blip in the lifetime of the universe. Just breathe that in for a few breaths. And keep letting the mind settle as you feel into your body, as you feel into your center, your core, your heart space. Going internal to find that voice that naturally rises. The sensations that naturally arise. That inner content that you intrinsically have, it's inherent to you as a human being. A whole world of internal content that's vastly more fascinating, vastly deeper than anything you could see in your social media feed. That even though sometimes it's really difficult, that the more we look within, the more we turn away from the external, from that external messaging, that external locus of control. And we can turn inward to the rich substrata of the psyche, of the self, and of the soul. That's in us all the time. We're just walking around with all that in us. And we can turn at any moment and look within. And just breathe and be with that. We have the wisdom and the pain of our ancestors within us. We have the wisdom and the pain of the collective unconscious within us, of our culture, of everything past and everything that is to be. We have the power of imagination. We have infinite depths to plumb if we just make the choice to turn inward. And we can sit with it every day if we want to, just for a few minutes, just for a few breaths. Remembering to anchor ourselves in that internal locus of control. in the heart, in the core of the body. That ultimately we lack nothing. Nothing we can get from our feed, from media, from pop culture will ever nourish us as much as what we can get within. And that is the inner voice that we cultivate through creativity, that we express through creativity, that we give voice to. It's the inner voice of our own wisdom, our own unique experience of aliveness, however it expresses, however it manifests. Keep breathing, keep bringing the attention back to the breath and the body, back to the miracle that is the body and life itself, expressing through you in this moment. And remembering it takes time to get the fruits of this practice, that it doesn't automatically always feel good or useful or like it has a purpose. But the more that you sit with this truth, the more it will reveal itself to you. Bringing the attention back to the breath and the body over and over again. It's really difficult to have FOMO when you remember that you have the entire universe contained within you. And as you're ready, start to bring your awareness back to the space that you're in, externalizing the awareness from that inner cave, that inner space, coming back and gently opening the eyes.